Welcome to the second Talk About programme on Jambo Radio with me, Amanda Baker. We're delighted to be with you again as we get into our groove. Now, I didn't have much opportunity last week to really introduce myself, and we have quite a busy programme today. So I will just say, if anybody's interested in finding out a little bit more about me, I have a blog. That's my only online presence, and it's called Brown Girl Outside the Ring. And the irony of that will probably be picked up more by people of Caribbean heritage. We'll leave that there. Do check it out. So welcome, as I say, to Jambo Radio. Our subject this week is the Contactless Society. Is it dehumanizing us? By way of introduction, it's probably worth saying that the thing that many psychologists identify as separating us as being human, as having many of the human skills that create civilized daily interaction, is empathy. So what is empathy? Most of us understand empathy as the ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, in simple layman's terms. It's the very human skill that many believe separates us from other animals. Although some animals, especially primates, have been shown to have small levels of empathy. Using something called the mirror response, it was shown that, for example, macaque monkeys experience a similar brain trigger when they pick up a nut as when they observe another monkey do the same thing. This mirror response is a measurable empathy indicator. In humans, we hope, this skill is far more developed and has brought us from our grunting caveman days to what we think of as the civilized world, where, on the whole, we can get along with other people, and most importantly, people we perceive as different to ourselves. So, in short, empathy could be said to be what essentially makes us human. That's why it's so concerning that there is, and has been for a while now, a sense that humans are losing this ability. One reason often cited is the increasing contactless society and the way we are ever more distanced from each other. In 2018, a Cambridge team studying autism, which is a condition often associated with an inability to empathise, concluded there was only a very small genetic element in people's ability to show empathy. That leaves us with a lion's share of this essential humanising ability that seems to be learned behaviour, social behaviour. That is why so many who feel they have observed our decreasing ability to empathise are concerned that everyday disconnection from other human beings is causing us to lose this most precious, ultimately humanising skill. Sir Peter Bazalgette, who wrote The Empathy Instinct in 2017, describes the internet as inherently unempathetic. He also talks about problems of the modern workplace, where interaction is increasingly remote. From call centres where operatives never meet or even see the people they talk to online banking, automatic tills in supermarkets, and food delivered anonymously to our doors. We are losing the human contact and everyday friction that helps to hone empathy. This has particular importance for Black people, or any group identifiably different who can end up being the targets of a less empathetic society. So, let's talk about it. I'm delighted to have our first guest today, Bishop Francis. This is an interview we recorded earlier because Bishop Francis is incredibly busy. And to start off our topic today, we're going to play that for you. Thanks very much. programme and previous contributor, Bishop Francis Alao. Welcome.
Thanks, Amanda, for having me.
Oh, that's lovely. We're so pleased you could be here. Bishop Francis is a pastor with the Jesus Praise Church, the International Church of God Scotland. He's also a community leader and an ecumenicist. For those who may not be involved in church life, ecumenical practice is particularly pertinent for what we're going to be discussing today: human interaction, empathy, and understanding those who may be coming from a different viewpoint, a different background to ourselves. So that might be as good a place as any to start. Bishop Francis, would you mind explaining to our listeners a little bit about ecumenical practice?
Thank you very much, Amanda. Ecumenical practice is something that is being perceived by different people in different ways. To some, it's nothing but sheer compromise. They wonder, why would somebody who is holding to a particular doctrine, a doctrinal belief or persuasion, would stoop so low, quote and unquote, to go and be associating with other people who believe in XYZ. But when you look at it critically and you detach all the sentiments of we are better than they are, then we'll see that we tend to gain more by giving a listening ear, by making effort to close the gap. Because when we look at other people from afar, the gap seems wider and broader. Things that divide will look so huge. But when you dare to come closer, you begin to realize how narrow the gap is. You begin to realize many things that you agree on. Then you come to that point that you see that things that divide is so narrow. They are things that are negotiable. So that is the way I can define ecumenism. So if you dare to come closer to other people, you see that many of the things you have held onto, which make you to see them possibly as an enemy or non-Christian or people who don't share your faith or who are not practicing it the right way, you find out that that's not the case.
Fantastic. And actually, what a brilliant start, because at the top of the programme, we're talking about dehumanising, we're talking about that very thing you've mentioned there, the distance between people, and empathy. And you used a fantastic word right at the beginning there, which is compromise. And certainly, I think there'd be few people who would argue that in the world we're in at the moment, the way things are, compromise really needs to be brought right to the fore. And empathy, that incredibly human trait, is one of the things that helps us to compromise. And I love as well this idea of closing the gap, and the closer you are to somebody, the smaller the differences seem. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so let's really pitch in a bit deeper. Today we're thinking very much about the importance of contact for basic humanity, and how that can be compromised in an increasingly contactless society. And for many people, when they think of religious leaders like yourself, they think of the big events in life, the rites of passage, births, deaths, marriages, and all of those things we know have traditionally important pastoral care roles in churches of all varieties and across religions. But for our listeners, if we can just move away from that and hear a little bit about the very ordinary, day-to-day human role of a minister or a pastor in the community, when they're out and about, just having that human contact with real people?
Yeah, you are right, Amanda. The first, I don't want to use the word mistake, misconception, really, is that people have relegated religion and its place in our day-to-day life to those things you've mentioned earlier on: marriage, baptism, funeral, and they see ministers of religion in that perspective, that that's what they are useful for. We use them when we need them, then we lay them aside, we continue with our day-to-day life. Then that tells you where our society today, in the name of postmodernism, where we have placed God in our lives, that when we need him, we look for one of his staff, we contact them, then when we are done with him, we don't see God as being relevant in our day-to-day life. And when you look at it, this generation is so smart in many ways. We want things fast, quick, and now. And then we think, but when it comes to wisdom, the moral life is going down, but the smartness is going up. Look at the young ones. So smart, so intelligent. Some things we could not undo on the computer until we turned 18, 20. A 2-year-old will just work it out for you effortlessly. But when it comes to morals, when it comes to those virtues, those values that keep society strong, they are missing. And that leads to the question of individualism. The society is called the society because of the communal element. If we're to talk about individual, we'll refer to you as Amanda. We'll refer to me as Francis. But when we bring all the people in this studio together and in these premises, then we are talking about people. But today we are veering away from that. We believe that the more I keep to myself, the better my life will be. I want my privacy. But it's becoming counterproductive. Look around us. It didn't just begin with COVID or the pandemic. It started long ago. Go on the train or public transport. Everybody would just sit down in their corner with their headphone and doing whatever they are doing on their phone. And they may travel for 3 hours. And the one sitting next to the other never say hi. They don't know. So they will spend 6 hours together in one small compartment. They never get to know each other. They go away. At the bus stop waiting for bus. But in those days, somebody will walk up to you and chat you up. Something good may develop from their relationship. You may begin to see the benefits in that stranger that you wouldn't have been able to tap if you had not walked up to them to initiate a conversation. You see neighbors living in a flat, in a building. You only meet in the elevator. You don't even say hi. Everybody looks the other way. And you go your separate ways. You don't know anything about the other person. It wasn't like that before. So, and we thought we were getting better, or our life, the quality of our life was getting better by doing that. But no, it's not. And these days, if you see some young people misbehaving in the street, everybody will look away. It's none of my business. I don't want to get involved. But in those days, an adult will come. It doesn't have to be their parents who will correct them. And they will listen. But these days, everybody is on their own. Then we moved from there to the idea of contactless or cashless society. From there is something about money that is sacred. But yeah, it has its benefits. There are pros and cons of cashless society. It will minimize fraud, but it will also aggravate fraud. Because if you say, I don't want people to come to my house to rob me, so I don't want to keep cash at home, but you keep all your money in one system that some people you don't know are managing it for you, and they give you to press a button and they will release your money. If someone else should hack into that system from their own error, then you'll be the victim. And many other things. And also, it makes us not to be able to keep tab on our spending. Because if you have got, let's say, £100 in your pocket, in your wallet,
oh, I would be lucky to have that in my pocket.
You be judicious how you spend it. When
Yes.
you think of what you need till the next payday or the next time you will be able to have more money, so you be careful. But now, at the press of a button, you can order for things. They will be brought to your doorstep. So if care is not taken, that could make us poorer, more careless.
You know what? There is so much in what you've said here. I'm going to just cut in because I want to just put it so that we don't lose some of the bigger points. You mentioned COVID, and I would like to know how that has affected your practice. But something else you said, which I think is probably even more important, is that this didn't start with COVID. And I think we hear a lot of this at the moment. Oh, this is because of COVID, that's because of COVID. I think COVID has acted as a magnifier. But a lot of these problems which you've identified were there before. I have to say, I've never had a problem with people not speaking to me at a bus stop. If anything, it's a bit the other way. But yes, this disconnect. But you've talked there a lot about materialism. So let's really think about pre-COVID, and we're going to talk more with our second guest about the kind of way we communicate electronically. But I want to go back to something you said about money, because actually, is wealth part of the problem? Material things, having things that I've been in countries, and I'm sure you have, that are not as wealthy as this, and you're automatically thrown together more. You're not sitting in a car, you're on a bus, or you're in a street. You're not in a house where it's just you and two other people. There's more. Has wealth and material things got something to do with our disconnect?
To a large extent. Yeah, it's got something to do with it. Because it's not good to keep looking back. Life is evolving and it's impacting on the society in different ways. But then we also need to always assess where we are to see if we are veering off the track so that we can amend on time. You see, materialism has got to do with it, because it's like we are winning the war but losing the battle, or whichever way they put it. Sometimes, you see, everybody today wants to have a big house, a big car, modern technology. All this is good. But when we look at the impact on the family life and our social life, beginning with each family and society. So the husband and wife, they come together, they are raising their children, then but because they want a bigger house, a bigger car, a better quality of life and things like that, so they take a job, looking for high-profile job, and that may take one of them away from that surrounding, traveling, even not staying at home, maybe coming back over the weekend and things like that, and the other one will have to go and take a job to be able to maintain the kind of standard of life they want to live, requiring dropping the children somewhere for 8 hours, picking them. So there is no more communication. So something is missing. We are gaining something but losing something else. And if we will not be cognizant of what we are losing. We'll be fixated on what we are gaining. Then many they want to have a big house with jacuzzi, with everything, all the things of life, but then they have it, then they lose a home. The children are not well raised. Then when you get to a certain age, you begin to think of your legacy. I've worked so hard all my life. I've made all the money I can. I've put all the money in a can. I'm not sitting on the can, but now my age is not getting younger. Soon, whether I like it or not, I will be expiring. what becomes of all these things I've put in the can. And I want my children to continue with the legacy. But have I had enough time to raise them in such a way that they can maintain what I've spent all my life working for? These things begin to dawn on us. So these are the side effects of all this rat race that we are making and relegating social life, family life to the background, because we want to be the modern man, modern family. We want to be high up there. So these are the things, and it also affects, like talking about contactless society. You see, because of all this, you see the wife going to work. When she's returning, the husband is just leaving for work. So no communication.
Marriage is contactless.
Yeah, no communication. Mm-hmm. So, and if one observes something wrong with the children, any of the children at the early stage, they want to communicate to see how do we deal with this? Am I the one imagining it, or is it real? Do you want to take a second look? No room for communication, because the work pattern does not give room for that. And little thing we become a big thing in the life of that child. And the child is so eager to hear or to share his burden, his worry with the parents, but they are not there. They are there, but they are not there. Then he will go and start searching on Google or going to his peers to seek advice, depending on whom he is taking the advice from. You see, all these are the things that they look so minute, but they are capable of causing us pain later in life. So it impacts on the society. So we now cannot trace it intrinsically to material, not necessarily because they are materialistic, but because they want a better quality of life. So they throw caution to the wind, and they begin to downplay other important things.
Okay, right. I'm going to, because I know we only have you for a very short time, which is very sad. I'm sure we'll have you again, but picking out from some of that, and particularly you touched there on the importance of family life, I want to think just maybe for our final question about something which comes from that. I want us to think about food. This may sound like a swerving away, but it's not. Bear with me. Obviously, food is something else that's hugely important in family life. It also plays a massive part in Bible stories, either in reality or as analogy. It's all there. I mean, even if we start with the very basics of the breaking of bread, you know, children, regardless of whether they have been brought up within a church, will all know the story of the feeding of the 5,000. We have the sour wine at the crucifixion. I mean, it's endless. We've got the Old Testament manna from heaven. Most of us grew up with parents who at least prepared meals if they didn't grow it themselves. And maybe the generation before that, certainly my grandparents would have grown food. But it was prepared for us. It was part of family life. You would be in the kitchen helping out, prepare that food, and then all sat down together. And certainly when I was teaching Sunday school, we would have faith suppers, and there are secular versions of that. There's the potluck supper. So food is absolutely integral to human interaction. Now, we've gone from that, and again, this is something else which has really sort of sped up during COVID, to people getting food delivered anonymously. Somebody arrives on a bike, rings on the doorbell, hands over a plastic bag. How is that affecting our human interaction?
Well, interestingly, we run a food bank project, and during the height of COVID, we were reaching out to about 200 families every week. I mean, every week. And even when we started, we were focusing, because we were running from our church center, but because of COVID, we moved back home. We were running from our house, and our house became a mecca. People would come queue at the door because of COVID restriction and social distancing. So we're handing, and we're going to high-rise buildings, delivering food baskets to people. We still do that. In fact, we are speaking now. My wife and all that team, I'm supposed to be doing that by 1 o'clock, but I excused myself for today. So and also we were doing it from the people far away from our house. But what interesting experience that our neighbors, they'll be watching us as we're driving different cars out there to go and deliver food. People are coming, we are giving them baskets. We were looking at our street that they are comfortable, they are well-to-do people, they don't need it. And people will be watching from the window until it dawned on us that it was taking a different dimension. It was becoming like a racist thing. Looking at the kind of people who are coming, Asians were coming up, but mostly Africans, and a few people from Eastern Europe coming to our house. And so then our neighbors, immediate neighbors, were wondering, what's wrong with Francis and his family? We know them, they are good people. But we assume that they don't need it until some good friends approach us and say, why, okay, we see you giving people beautiful flowers. Whatever. I say, oh, sorry, you need to say, good. So we started dropping flowers at the doors of our neighbors. Then we were getting thank you card. Then some people were bold enough to say, if you can add some food as well. So that's how we started doing it for everybody, and we're still doing that up to now. Though the number has gone down, some people have gone back to work. So we reach about 120 families every week now. So talking about food is part of our life, and the story of food is as old as the story of the human race in the Bible. And there is something about food and life. And like you mentioned, that families should endeavor to let their children connect with, if not growing food, cooking food, homemade meals, and then families sitting around the table. Those are the things that we are losing out on about this contactless society, that hardly you will see a family that will have at least one meal together in a day. So we should endeavor to make sure you have at least one meal together as a family. Not when you are having the meal, everybody will have their headphone, just pinging on their phones or their tablet or iPad or watching TV. So there's no communication. No. Put all that away. If you're going to watch a show, this is what I do in my family. I'm not preaching what I'm not practicing. At least, no matter how busy I am or my wife is, our children know, even if we have to shift to come back from school. So some of them are going to uni now, so that may not be possible for some of them. So we sit around the table, we chat, I watch their previous program with them. So that's is important because it makes us to gel together. We are being driven apart by so many things. So we need to really rein it in to make sure the family that prays together and plays together, they stay together.
Thank you so much, Bishop Francis. You've been a lovely guest, and I know you're busy and you've got to dash off, but thank you from me, and thank you so much from Jambo Radio. Cheers.
Thanks for having me. God bless you.
Okay, so that was a super contribution there from our first guest. Just a reminder, you are listening to Talk About, our social debate show with me, Amanda Baker, here on Jambo Radio. We are broadcasting from Renfrewshire to the whole of Glasgow and the UK and the world, and anybody else who is lucky enough to be tuned in. We're going to move on in just a moment to our second guest, and I'll come to that. Our subject this week is the Contactless Society. Is it dehumanizing us? But as you're probably getting to grips with this now, we are going to be having a different topic each week, and there is some opportunity for you to become involved, even while we get into our groove. The website, Jambo website, has a comment section, and if you would like to comment or if you have a question related to up and coming topics, then do please pop them up there and we'll have a look at them, and it would be great to include those in this show. Give us your name, tell us a little bit about yourselves, as much or as little as you would like, and then leave your comment or ask your question, and we will have a trawl through those. And if you are interested in doing that, our subject for next week is, why do we care more about cars than kids? So that's quite a provocative title, deliberately so, and we will discuss more generally things about the environment. Obviously, we've got COP26 coming up in Glasgow, so it's very relevant. But the specific topic for next week's Talk About here on Jambo Radio is, why do we care more about cars than kids? Okay, so back to our topic for today, the contactless society. Is it dehumanizing us? And we, at the top of the programme, talked about empathy and how important that is for our very humanity. We had a wonderful contribution there from Bishop Francis in his role as a church pastor here in Glasgow. We're now going to move on to a guest very relevant for this topic, steeped in social media and technology in a way that I certainly will never be, and that is the founder and director of Jambo Radio, George Tarr. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
You're actually very welcome to be here on your own radio station.
Well.
Okay, so we're going to kick off as we did with our first guest. George, just tell the listeners a little bit, not just about Jambo, but how this all works with social media.
Okay, I think on the premises of their question, if contactless war is dehumanizing, humans, I think my response to that is there is a yes and there is a no answer to that question on that context. It depends on which direction you're looking for. I think if there is anything that has taught humans how to be humans, it's the contactless world. The fact that, especially during the peak of the pandemic, where people, humans, began realizing the importance of just being a human than being this kind of contactless human, being on the bus. I think your previous guest was talking about how people just sit on the bus and listen to their headphones and listen to their music. They don't say hello to anybody, and people just walk past each other as if something happening at the other side of the road doesn't concern the person that is walking on the other side of the road. Well, to some extent it's true, but if you put the human element, that is happening there is not in the virtual world, it's the world that you live in. Whatever is happening in the technological world, it's also important. It also has a human touch element to it. Now, the issue where contactless society and contactless perhaps tools enables human, it makes it a bit inhumane for human beings to be able to function, is where somebody cannot leave the house, don't create any friends, whether they are virtual friends or they are real friends in real life, and depend only on trying to live an online life. That is the way I see it. But in terms of the story of Jambo, we started as a virtual radio station, but we'll be able to mobilize human that's actually doing stuff on the radio station. Now, in terms of the social media is although it looks like a virtual platform, or they look at virtual platforms, they're actually really contributing to human interaction it's virtual, yes, but it's a vehicle that connects human beings. A lot of people have met friends because because they met on social media in a virtual way, then they become they started living in the real world. So if you combine all of this positive, and you will see that there's very little negative about how how a contactless society is actually dehumanizing us. It doesn't do that much except the way you take it, except how each individual deals with it. There are negative things that are on social media platforms, but if you look at it, the social media really connects our world to humans, and a lot of human connections generate from contactless tools.
Okay, I mean, that's actually fascinating because really, I'm very into radio. I mean, as I think I mentioned to you, I haven't had television in a long time. And I find the radio actually very human. I mean, it just so happens that in the modern world and on the platform Jambo has, a lot of that happens through social media. But I think there is something intrinsically more human about radio. I mean, we're all sitting here face to face. We're having this chat. We have technical and production support. It's going out live time with real voices. So that's maybe a step away from what we really mean when we're thinking about, say, social platforms and the contactless society. And just before I move on, pick up on one thing you said there, which I hadn't thought of, and that is that in some ways, COVID and the sudden decrease in the availability of human contact may have actually made people value it more, something that was taken for granted. Would you think that's the case?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because a lot of people that were not on social media pre-COVID are now on social media. They look at it as an opportunity. I know I've been trying to convince you, or perhaps baptize you into the social media where, Amanda, but it takes a bit of time. There's a whole Sunday school and all of that I need to go through. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make here is it became the social media, the contactless tools enables communication. Facebook became where people can go and find people that have never not seen for a while. Facebook became where you go and discover what has happened, and Twitter, has become really important. I understand that these tools have been used negatively, but we, from Jambo's perspective, from me with a digital media background, I think, those tools are there to use for a very positive reason. You can communicate important messages using those tools. We have had a lot of people engage on our Facebook page in a world where recruitment was no longer done physically. It was done contactlessly. Recruitment opportunities that we posted on our Facebook page had more engagement. So we've seen those are real things, that real people have gone out to get jobs because they've come on Facebook. But if you consider Facebook, for example, just like somewhere that in a negative light, you wouldn't have, some people wouldn't have taken the opportunity. So it is there. The negative for me, the positive for me are more important. I agree that some of the negative are really dehumanizing, if we put it in that context, because people misbehave on people that misbehave, or people that abuse people on social media platforms, which is something that we tolerate, are not good examples. But the big picture here is what is the bigger benefit of social media platform, or virtual platforms, or virtual tools that people can use to communicate, and all of that. So for me, I'll look at it as a communication tool. I think based on that question that you're asking, the contactless society really just exists for a very tiny minority of people that is negative to them.
Okay, so it sounds there, which makes complete sense, is if we're partly talking about whether you are in charge or it is in charge. And if the person is in charge, then we have less problem. But if the social media platform is too invasive, then we may. We're going to move away from this down onto the street. But the final thing I want to just ask on this, because obviously you're so much more embedded, and just what I'm just going to do with covering up the make, anybody would just who's watching, have a look there. This is my phone, and if you're not watching, if you're listening just on Jambo Radio, I can tell you that two of the other four people in this room are sniggering, and that three now, that will tell you what kind of phone I'm holding up. It's not a smartphone, it does text and it makes phone calls, and that generally tells everybody exactly where I am when it comes to technology. George is streets ahead of me, and as he said, trying to persuade me into the modern world. But just on this point, because this is quite important, we've talked about social media, we've talked about Jambo Radio, and I'm a huge fan of radio, which is partly why I'm here. I think it's incredibly positive and actually very, very human. But not all social media platforms are like this. And one of the huge issues we have on social media, the social media that I'm not on, is anonymity. And I'd just like some of your views, nothing to do with the radio or your professional experience, but just your human view on this, the problems with online anonymity, because this, I think, speaks directly to what we were talking about before, about empathy, about who we are as humans. And if people can come to a situation where they can have an effect on someone else's life, often negative, and there are no consequences, because unlike in the studio today where we all know each other, our names are there, anybody listening knows who we are, they can do and say things that are completely horrendous, and they don't have to take responsibility for it because even their name is not there. So just give me some of your thoughts, George, not about this, about the kind of social platforms where people can have a sort of free reign anonymously. What problems does that bring up?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something there, Amanda, which I think is quite interesting. You're a fan of radio. I just want to take this point. You're a fan of radio, and radio, you just listen to people, for a typical traditional radio, you listen to voices. If you catch a program that has started, you might have missed out the introduction. And then if you don't listen to the end of the program, you might also miss out the introduction of who was there. But what plays in your mind there is the imagination, the context of what is being discussed, why you tune in and why you're staying on, and then why you perhaps log off. You can apply that the same, and and if you look at radio, phone-ins are screens through, and if you got a live phone-in call, they are screened through on the radio. But before radio became where it's really highly regulated, people would just phone up the number that the announcer, a presenter like yourself would just say, oh, if you want to contribute to this topic, phone up, and they ring the studio number, and straight on, they are on air. They could say anything. Those were tiny minority of people. Majority of people contributed to the discussion, but a few people phoned up and completely irrelevant, abusive, perhaps using, and then they will not say their correct name and things like that. So the process has advanced now. I think social media is going that direction as well. So this is the way I'll look at it. On Twitter, people can go on there with either different names or no name at all. But there is a big talk now about regulating that. At least Twitter know who is there. They have some sort of identity. I mean, we use social media heavily on Jambo Radio, so there's a lot of verification, ID verification that's getting being done now, and as a result of what has previous incident and things that are going on social media, so it's beginning to get there. So I'm rather very hopeful that the screening process on social media platform, where people will not be anonymous again, will be you provide your ID for you to have an account, and then you have a proper name so that they double check if you're putting an AKA name, and then let that be very clear who this person is, and Twitter is able to verify, just like the radio is doing now with screening everybody that's got to contribute, whether for a live phone in or for a pre-recorded program. So there is a positive aspect there, and I'm very hopeful that that will change. I know the impact that anonymity has created on social, especially on Twitter, where people have been abused. But the question we can also ask ourselves, without undermining, the impact, the consequences of those anonymous people that have come on social media and say terrible things about people and stuff like that. But you can get that as well on the street. That is true. You can get that as well on the radio. You can get that as well on the TV. People appear on TV and they get abused on the social media platform by people that actually have a name, but it might not be their name. So that aspect of anonymity is beginning, it will change. There need to be a lot of regulation around that, and to change the consequences and the impact that is going to go there. But are we going to also be able to change what happens on the street, that you can be attacked by a stranger, depending on where you're walking, at what time you're walking, and where somebody feel offended? We deal with a lot of racial attacks. Those are things that are happening every day. Social media is a new thing. So I always think there is a possibility that you could also be abused and attacked on the street by a stranger, somebody that doesn't know you, just like you get attacked on social media. But if you don't know this person, if you can make your way, if you can stay out of that, or you could walk away from that, it's fine. Just avoid also interacting or giving opportunity, putting a human face for where there's no human. How can you exchange a conversation or take offense on somebody that cannot identify themselves? That's a coward for the beginning. In the beginning, for a start, the person that cannot identify themselves is a coward, so you don't have to talk anything to with them. So, for me, that's the way you deal with it.
Okay, yeah, great. And I think that's actually a very, very pertinent point. We do tend to assume that, all this has all happened, attacking people, since social media. Yes, it's always gone on, but it's moved on. And I think it's just maybe the sheer volume of it. Thanks.
It's probably why it's definitely spreading a bit more. But the spread is not coming. If you've not been a victim of a nonsense attack or abuse, it's very hard to understand. But a lot of people are looking for platforms to hide behind. Before the social media became a big thing where people go there and abuse people, you had proper legal organizations that were being, imposing themselves in society to be racially abusive to people from black and any minority. That is it. If you see the organization, political organization, pressure groups and stuff like that they form and become a legal entity just to oppose anything that has to do with people of different color. That is there. It's evident. So how far back has politics started? How far back has racism started? How far back has racial motivated abuses, offenses, and stuff like that it started? They are not. They increase now because people are always looking for different platforms to do that. It's happening in schools. It's happening in clubs. It's happening. As a young black man, I can't remember how many times I've been asked to just wait at the front of the bar until a certain amount of people are in there. I couldn't be allowed then. So those are experiences. So the lived experiences of people, and then those abuses that people are getting on social media, they are not new if you've had this sort of experience, but I understand that we cannot undermine the impact on this for people that are on social media. But let's be also be very clear that these are not new things that are happening. It's just another platform that is also helping helping cowards, basically, as I said, helping cowards to be able to abuse people.
Thank you very much. And of course, the flip side of that is that we know from, the huge incident last year, in fact, the thing that brought us together, the murder of George Floyd, that there are many hugely positive developments with social media, justices which have been done. And it seems purely and simply because these things have been caught on camera and put on social media, and these things have literally changed the direction of society. Okay, so I'm going to switch tack now a little bit, because we're not here obviously just to talk about social media. We're talking about contactless society, and that is not just to do with the way we communicate on social media. So I'm assuming, George, that unlike me, you probably do internet banking, yeah? Are you quite comfortable shopping at automated tills in the supermarket?
You know what, I don't know. I think I know a lot of my friends, especially the guys. Well, apart from one of my friends that I know that they can spend the time in the supermarket or in the shop to buy maybe a pair of shoes or anything. But I'm the guy that spend my time online. I find what I'm looking for, and then if I want to do any physical, I'm just going to walk in and take it up and pay for it and go.
So I'm talking to someone who clearly doesn't like shopping, so we'll leave that to one.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I do my banking online. I do everything online. I do all my transactions. But you know what? It helps with speed. It helps with speed. Yeah.
And I accept that. I hear you, and I know that is the reason that it is promoted. But let me just run this by you. A little anecdote here. Bearing in mind who I am and my attitude to technology, it won't surprise you that even years ago, before this was mainstream, every time I went into my local bank, we'll stick with banks for a minute, the teller would always ask me, why don't you do internet banking? And my reply would always be, well, I actually quite like human beings and I don't want to unemploy you. And they used to look at me as if I was completely off my rocker, which I'm not arguing, maybe I am. Fast forward a decade and a half, and I'm still with the same bank, but 3 branches of the bank that I use, I'm not going to name it because they're all the same, have closed. I now need to get a bus if I want to do over-the-counter banking, which I do. But more importantly, many of those people are now unemployed. So there is, on the one hand, the issue of just doing everything remotely and reducing our day-to-day incidental contact, the kind of thing Bishop Francis was talking about, chatting to somebody at the bus stop, having a quick chat with somebody over, the counter when you're buying your bread or whatever. But when we get to a point where everybody's banking online and everybody's using tills that are automatic, and even more people have become redundant, not needed in society, what happens then? Because I think it's very different if you have the choice. So you would choose to to do those things. I would choose not to do them. The difference is, I feel that I will soon lose that choice because they simply won't be there. The choices we had even before COVID will be gone.
You know, I think that's a very important point that you said that, you know, especially bringing the fact that, you know, if the contactless tools that, especially in banking, in jobs, are the with talks about having perhaps robots workforce, you know, it is threatening to employment. But I think one of the thing we also thinking. I'm also really passionate about climate change. Now, the way I'm going to respond to this, Amanda, is we are conscious about the climate. We understand the dangers that the cars and vehicles are creating on our environment, and the impact of climate change, and environmental issues. Now, if we take it this way and say, okay, our society is moving towards getting a safer world, dealing with climate change issues, then we need to embrace the technological tools that are enabling us to be able to do stuff that doesn't require us to jump on public transport or cars and drive miles and miles and pollute the environment and all of that. Would there be opportunity for people to change, to change lifestyle? That is what any challenge, we've learned that from the pandemic. That is what every challenge that comes to human is equal to a change. And that change is coming through two things here. The digital or virtual contactless tools are enabling us to begin to change our lifestyle. And then the case for that is people can now do things from their bedroom. Well, we've heard of successful businesses that have been done from the bedroom. Actually, Jumbo Radio started in the living room somewhere, but we're here. So, to see the advantage of that, and then the impact that the job opportunities that are there, is, are we wanting to stay the same? Do we still want people, 200 people working in a Tesco, in a local Tesco, be traveling by car and going be traveling by car, going to work, when we're trying to deal with emergency climate change issues? We're trying to deal with the pollution issues. So these are some of the things that we need to look at deeply. This is a question, this is something that I've thought deeply about, and I know for a fact that I don't own a car now. I don't own a car now for personal reasons. But I also know that if I want to own a car, I will go for the electric option, because I think I want to make my own contribution to that. But not everybody might be able to. I don't even know if I will be able to afford an electric car. But if I can't afford it, then I need to look for a means that I can work effectively. I can be productive. So for me to respond to that question, looking at the time, I think that we should embrace technology. I'm not saying that trying to convince you, but I'm saying that because I think that we should embrace technology. Then let's connect that with the emergency of the climate emergency that we are dealing with, and then we can have a better result. There will be jobs that will be created in the digital world. People are able now to work remotely. Call centers are being run now remotely. Before you have thousands of people travel by car and public transport, pollute the whole place just to get to work. So that, for me, is my case.
George, thank you so much. And that is a hugely important angle. I absolutely salute you for not being a car owner, and I am in that club with you. we can each give ourselves a pat on the back. It also feeds beautifully into the topic for next week. Do we care more about cars than kids? And as I said at the top of the programme, please do leave comments or questions on the Jambo website. I want to say a huge thank you to our guests, to our production, Serena Piotto, our tech quiz, Kenneth Jumbo, and we hope to see you again next